Are you unknowingly sabotaging your tomato garden? Most gardeners rely on old advice that sounds helpful, like removing those so-called suckers. But what if that's actually the reason your harvest keeps falling short? Studies show that unpruned tomato plants can yield up to 30% more fruit by weight compared to those with their secondary stems removed. That means following this common tip could be costing you a big part of your harvest. Those side shoots aren't energy thieves but yield boosters. Today we're exposing the #1 myth that's holding your plants back and showing you how to fix it as soon as possible. Let's take a closer look at why this advice is so widespread and what's really happening to your tomato plants. Many gardeners have heard that removing the small shoots growing between the main stem and branches, commonly called suckers, will help their tomatoes thrive. The idea is that these side shoots drain energy from the plant, leading to fewer or lower quality tomatoes. But while this advice is everywhere, it doesn't hold up when you look at what actually happens in your garden. The word sucker makes these shoots sound like freeloaders, but that's not accurate. These side shoots are really just secondary stems. They produce leaves, flowers, and eventually tomatoes just like the main stem. When you remove them, you're not just taking away extra growth, you're removing future fruit. Fewer stems mean fewer leaves, which means less photosynthesis. That's the process that turns sunlight into energy for your plant. When you cut off these stems, you reduce the plant's ability to create the energy it needs to produce a strong, healthy crop. Modern research, including studies highlighted by the laid-back gardener, shows that unpruned tomato plants often yield more fruit by weight than those with suckers removed. While the individual tomatoes on a pruned plant might be a bit larger, the overall harvest is usually smaller. This is because those extra stems and leaves help the plant capture more sunlight and produce more energy, resulting in more fruit overall. Many gardeners who let their tomato plants grow naturally notice their plants are more vigorous and productive, even if the fruit isn't quite as large. The practice of removing these side shoots dates back to when tomatoes were mostly grown on stakes. Pruning made it easier to tie plants up and keep them neat, but when you grow tomatoes in cages or let them sprawl, there's no practical reason to keep removing secondary stems. In fact, each cut you make is another wound that can let pathogens enter the plant, increasing the risk of disease. This is especially true if you don't sterilize your tools between cuts. By reducing the plant's leaf area, you also lower its ability to photosynthesize, which can mean a weaker plant and a smaller harvest. There are some situations where pruning makes sense. If you're growing tomatoes in a tight space or need to improve air circulation, removing a few side shoots can help manage the plant's shape. But there's no need to strip away every secondary stem. A balanced approach, removing only what's necessary, can make the plant easier to handle without sacrificing your harvest. So, if you've been carefully removing every so-called sucker, you might want to rethink that habit. Letting some secondary stems grow could give you a bigger, healthier crop. Try leaving a few plants unpruned and see how their yields compare to your pruned ones. You might be surprised at the results. Tomato success isn't just about pruning. There's another factor that can make or break your harvest, and it's one that many gardeners overlook: how and when you water your plants. Watering mistakes are often the silent culprit behind disappointing tomato harvests. Many gardeners pay close attention to how much water their plants get, but the real trouble often lies in when and how that water is delivered. If you're watering at the wrong time or using the wrong method, you might be setting your tomatoes up for disease, stress, and lackluster yields without even realizing it. One of the most common missteps is watering in the evening. The logic seems sound. Cooler temperatures mean less evaporation and the soil stays moist longer. But this habit leaves moisture clinging to leaves and stems overnight, creating an environment where fungal problems like early and late blight can take hold. When water lingers on foliage during the cooler, darker hours, it doesn't evaporate quickly. That prolonged dampness allows pathogens more time to multiply, increasing the risk of infection and weakening your plants over time. On the other hand, overwatering is just as risky. Saturated soil suffocates tomato roots and blocks oxygen, which can lead to yellowing leaves, root rot, and fruit that cracks or develops dark sunken spots. The symptoms of overwatering and underwatering often look similar: wilted leaves, stunted growth, or even leaf curl, which can make it tricky to diagnose the real problem. The best way to avoid both extremes is to check soil moisture a few inches below the surface. If the soil feels dry, water deeply. If it's still damp, wait another day before checking again. Timing your watering is just as important as the amount. Early morning is the best time to water tomatoes. This practice allows any moisture that lands on the leaves to dry out as the sun rises, reducing the window for fungal spores to establish themselves. When you water in the middle of the day, much of the moisture evaporates before reaching the roots, especially during hot weather. Sticking to morning watering means your plants get the moisture they need when they need it, and you cut down on water waste. How you deliver water to your plants matters too. Overhead sprinklers and spraying water directly onto the foliage can cause more problems than they solve. Water on the leaves not only increases the risk of disease, but when the sun comes out, it can even lead to leaf burn. Drip irrigation or soaker hoses are far more effective, delivering water right to the base of the plant and keeping the leaves dry. In fact, drip irrigation can reduce leaf moisture by over 80% compared to overhead sprinklers, making it much less likely that disease will take hold. If you're using a watering can, aim carefully at the base of each plant to keep the foliage dry. Consistency is another key factor. Tomatoes prefer steady moisture, not wild swings between dry and soggy. Fluctuations in water supply can lead to issues like blossom end rot and cracked fruit. Mulching around the base of your plants helps lock in moisture, keeps the soil temperature stable, and prevents the top layer from drying out too quickly. This simple step can save you from many common watering headaches. With the right timing, careful watering techniques, and consistent soil moisture, your tomato plants will be far more resilient and productive. But even with perfect watering habits, there's another common gardening practice that can make or break your harvest, especially if you're not paying attention to how you do it. Pruning and disease prevention go hand in hand when it comes to keeping tomato plants healthy, but it's easy to cross the line from help to harm if you're not careful. Pruning is often recommended to manage plant size, improve airflow, and keep diseases at bay, but the way you prune matters just as much as what you remove. Research warns that pruning wounds can harbor pathogens unless tools are sterilized, so it's important to approach this task with both strategy and caution. Start by focusing on what actually needs to be pruned. Not every branch or leaf is a problem. The best place to begin is with yellowing or dying leaves, especially those near the base of the plant. These leaves don't contribute to photosynthesis anymore, and if they touch the soil, they can help diseases like blight move from the ground onto your plant. Low-hanging or overcrowded stems should also go, since they trap moisture and block airflow. This extra moisture creates a breeding ground for fungal diseases. Simply removing a few targeted branches can make a real difference in how healthy your tomatoes stay. How you prune is just as important as what you prune. Each cut you make creates a small wound, and if you're not careful, those wounds can become entry points for disease. To avoid spreading problems from one plant to the next, wipe pruners with rubbing alcohol after each plant. It's a quick step, but it can protect your whole garden from outbreaks like early blight or septoria leaf spot. Also, prune when the foliage is dry, ideally in the morning or early evening so you don't spread moisture-related diseases. Avoid pruning during the midday heat or just before watering since wet leaves are more vulnerable to infection. Air circulation is another key part of disease prevention. Dense, overgrown plants trap humidity and block airflow, which lets fungal spores multiply. A well-pruned plant allows light and air to reach the center, helping the leaves dry out quickly after rain or watering. This makes it much harder for diseases to get a foothold. If you're using cages to support your tomatoes, you can remove a few leaves from the center to improve airflow even more. If you're growing indeterminate tomato varieties, pruning becomes even more useful. These plants keep growing and producing all season, so a little pruning helps manage their size and keeps them productive. Topping, removing the top of the main stem about a month before the first expected frost, can encourage the plant to put its energy into ripening the fruit it already has, rather than growing new stems. Just remember, do not top determinate varieties which stop flowering once they reach a set height. Pruning those can actually cut your harvest short. Balance is important. It's tempting to go overboard, but removing too many leaves can stress the plant and open the door to new problems. Leaves are critical for photosynthesis and help protect tomatoes from sun scald. Focus on taking off damaged or diseased leaves, and leave healthy foliage alone. If you ever need to remove more than a third of the plant's leaves, it's usually a sign of bigger issues like disease or pest pressure. When you put these steps together, you create tomato plants that are less likely to suffer from fungal infections and more likely to produce a strong harvest. Pruning with clean tools, targeting only what's necessary, and tailoring your approach to your tomato variety all help your plants thrive without unnecessary risk. Healthy tomatoes aren't about blindly following every gardening tip you've ever heard. It's about understanding what truly helps your plants thrive. Small adjustments in your tomato care routine can make a big difference in your results. Avoiding mistakes like over-pruning, watering at the wrong time, or neglecting disease prevention leads to stronger plants and bigger harvests. If you've been pruning every side shoot, try letting a couple grow this season and compare your yields. You might be surprised by the results. Try out the techniques from this video and see how your plants respond. Check out our tomato care checklist guide below for more detailed steps you can follow. Subscribe for more research-backed garden tips, and let us know your tomato results in the comments.